Welcome back to the Public Housing Resident Organizing and Participation Toolkit training series. The training series is meant to walk public housing residents through how to organize and run a successful resident council so that you can improve your housing and community. We encourage you to participate in the entire training series.
This training is based off of Guide 4, Partnering and Advocacy with the Housing Agency. As you go through the training, you may want to refer to the guide.
This training will discuss
How residents, through resident councils, can partner and advocate with their housing agency, also referred to as the PHA.
how to conduct a needs assessment
Ways resident councils and PHAs can work together.
and ways resident councils can advocate with PHAs to try to change policies or outcomes.
Things get done when residents are organized and come with legitimate requests. Being involved in a resident council is the best way to partner and advocate with the housing agency for the things you care about as a resident. Public housing residents may want to work with a resident council to get more attentive maintenance, improved safety, clearer communication with property owners, and more responsive programs.
Resident councils can benefit from having a cooperative partnership with the PHA. Regular communication and dialogue can help keep that relationship strong. Sometimes the resident council may wish to engage in advocacy with the housing agency to try to change or enact policies the residents favor.
Resident councils should
Regularly assess resident needs through surveys, meetings, and one on one conversations.
build a collaborative relationship with the housing agency by meeting regularly, discussing issues, debating ideas, problem solving, and making decisions together.
Partner with the PHA through trainings, service programs, the use of tenant participation funds, resident management corporations called RMCs, and the development of the housing agency annual or 5-year plans.
The first thing the resident council should do before advocating with the housing agency is understand residents' needs. To do this, you can
Conduct surveys
hold meetings,
and have one on one conversations.
consider how your residents prefer to be contacted, and use as many methods as possible to do the outreach. Consider making a survey available online, but also passing out a paper copy at meetings. Go door to door and talk to people. This outreach shows residents that the resident council is active and working for them.
Some questions to ask might include:
Do you have maintenance issues in your apartment? What are they? Have you made maintenance requests? How soon do you get an answer?
Are there housing agency policies that you think should change?
Are there programs or services you would like to see in your community? Are there current programs that could be improved?
Have you been able to get your questions answered by the PHA? If not, what do you need to know? Once you have a good number of surveys completed, compile the information, look for trends.
Which issues are the primary concerns most residents express?
Are there property wide concerns?
Also, consider which issues are more serious. For example, a common space that is not accessible to people with disabilities might not affect all residents, but could be prioritized over less serious concerns.
When the resident council presents issues and concerns in an organized way, this can be a benefit to everyone. Residents are supported in getting their issues resolved, and the housing agency has a streamlined process for receiving and addressing common concerns. This saves both residents and the housing agency time. Once your resident council has an idea of what issues are most important to residents, contact the PHA to plan a joint meeting.
Get to know each other. Find out why people are involved and more about who they are.
Have the same people participate regularly to make progress.
Have a standing, regular meeting. For example, the first Monday of each month at a certain time. Some groups like to alternate. One month the board meets with management, the next month is open to all residents.
Get things done. Accomplishing goals and having an impact will keep people interested and excited about the group. Work together to create big goals, but break those down into shorter term goals.
When the group accomplishes something together, take time to acknowledge it and celebrate.
Report back on progress and any issues to the resident council.
By meeting regularly to discuss ideas and issues, the resident council and the PHA will
Improve communication.
Conduct joint problem solving to better address resident needs.
Be able to develop long-term plans.
And will build trust and cooperation that can help prevent and resolve conflicts.
We'll now do a quick knowledge check. When deciding how to work with the housing agency, the first step the resident council should take is to
A. Conduct a needs assessment. B. Write to the local HUD field office. C. Choose a meeting date and time and offering to meet the housing agency. Or D. Write a memorandum of understanding.
We'll wait for a moment for you to consider your answer. You can always pause the training if you'd like to review the guide or consider your answer.
The correct answer is A. Before taking any other action, conduct a needs assessment to learn about the needs and interests of the residents at your property. All the other steps work to resolve the needs that residents express.
When setting up meetings between residents and the housing agency, who should attend?
A. Every resident possible. B. A regular group of representatives. C. A rotating group of representatives. Or D. Only the board of directors of the resident council.
We'll wait for a moment while you consider your answer.
The answer is B. A regular group of residents representing the full resident council should attend meetings with the housing agency to ensure that progress can be made. This group should report back to the full resident council on both the meetings and progress, and over time, leadership should rotate.
The ideal relationship between a housing agency and the resident council could be described as
A. Adversarial. B. No relationship. C. A partnership. Or D. As limited as possible.
Again, we'll pause for a moment while you consider your answer.
The answer is C. Resident councils should work to build a partnership with the housing agency. A strong partnership with good communication can lead to better outcomes, even when there are areas of disagreement. We'll look at some real-life examples of resident council and PHA collaboration.
By working together, the resident council and PHA can improve communication. In Baltimore County, Maryland, plans to stop the spread of COVID were initially being made separately by the property management staff of each of the senior buildings. The jurisdiction-wide resident council provided a space and brought together all the resident councils to discuss issues, offer input, and encourage the housing agency to develop a uniform plan of action. The new policy included distributing masks and food at senior buildings, as well as safe ways to allow for some visitors. Resident councils and PHAs can conduct joint problem solving.
In Charleston, Kanawha, West Virginia, resident councils hold 2 monthly meetings. One is residents only, and the other is with management. In the meetings with management, the groups work together to address issues the residents identified. If the resident council feels an issue has not been properly addressed, a board member brings it to the quarterly meeting with the PHA executive officer. Because residents and management talk out issues and potential solutions, the result better meets residents' needs. For example, they may decide where to improve lighting at the property or add security cameras to address security concerns. Through partnership, you can better address resident needs.
In St. Paul, Minnesota, computer labs were set up through a Ross grant. When the Ross grant ended, they needed to figure out how to maintain functioning computer labs. The resident councils and the PHA came up with the idea of hiring residents who would receive a stipend as a computer peer. When a resident puts in a ticket for a technical issue that comes up in the lab, the housing agency assigns a computer peer who uses their skills to fix the problem or to refer it to the PHA's IT department. Resident councils and PHAs can work together to develop long-term plans.
In Chicago, the resident councils and citywide advisory board meet regularly with the housing agency. During the citywide property rehabilitation process, the groups were able to build on their existing structures and relationships. Resident councils were very active in the redevelopment process through working groups with developers and service providers and ensured a strong policy on residents' right to return. Resident councils even helped track residents through the redevelopment process. Conflicts or disagreements between the housing agency and residents should be dealt with proactively before they become a major issue.
In-person meetings are often helpful to address specific disagreements and work towards solutions, if needed with a neutral facilitator. Tenant participation funds can be used to pay for a facilitator or a mediator. In St. Paul, Minnesota, the PHA contracts with the Minnesota Dispute Resolution Center to provide training on conflict resolution and communication to the resident councils. This support aids the resident council in having productive meetings and resolving differences constructively.
HUD encourages residents to be involved and participate in the overall policy development and direction of public housing operations. HUD regulations suggest specific ways the housing agency and resident council can collaborate, including through
Training, the housing agency plan, tenant participation funds, resident management corporations, RMCs, MOUs or written agreements between the resident council and the housing agency, and service coordination programs.
one area where resident councils and PHAs can work together is training residents. Resident councils can identify needed trainings, and management can either conduct the training themselves or identify outside experts who can help. HUD suggests the following as possible trainings:
Community organization and leadership, organizational development training for resident management corporations and resident councils, public housing policies, programs, rights and responsibilities, and business entrepreneurial training, planning, and job skills.
But you can also think outside the box. Keep in mind the priorities identified in the needs assessment. Look to local resources for training, including resident organizations, community colleges, vocational schools, HUD, federal and local agencies, and community organizations.
In St. Paul, Minnesota, PHA staff support the resident councils by providing training to board members on their roles and responsibilities, running meetings, and how to track expenses and file taxes. Individual training is provided to resident council treasurers and secretaries around their specific duties.
Another way to work with the PHA is through the PHA plan process. Housing agencies must prepare a plan that is updated regularly. Some PHAs do an annual component and a 5-year component.
Housing agencies must prepare a plan that is updated regularly. The plan sets the housing agency's policies, such as
How residents are selected, rent determination, grievance procedures, pet policies,
Types of housing offered, such as designated elderly or disabled housing,
PHA programs, such as ROS and FSS programs, and changes to public housing, like RAD conversion.
all of these things affect residents. Residents can participate through a resident advisory board.
For more information, see Guide 5, Advisory Boards in the Housing Agency Plan Process, and the training that follows this one.
The housing agency must provide funds that it receives from HUD for tenant participation to duly elected resident councils. Tenant participation funds may be used to assist residents with
Establishing and operating a resident council, running elections, and capacity building for resident councils.
For more information, see Guide 9 and the related training and the related tenant participation funds tools and training.
Under HUD rules, residents can choose to form a resident management corporation and can take over some or all of the management of their own public housing property. This gives the resident council a different relationship with the PHA and more control over decisions that are important to residents. There are different levels of self-management that a resident management corporation may choose. But with any of them, resident management requires a large time commitment from residents. If your resident council decides to pursue resident management, get ready to roll up your sleeves.
To learn more about resident management corporations, see Guide 8 and the related training. Housing agencies and resident councils can define their relationship through the process of creating or updating a memorandum of understanding, an MOU.
The document defines when and how the resident council and management will meet.
It is a legal agreement between the two groups that spells out their relationship, including what support the housing agency will provide to the resident council.
The document defines when and how the resident council and management will meet and spells out how the PHA will support the resident council.
The toolkit includes a sample MOU, which you can modify and use. See the related training for more information.
HUD offers programs that can provide funding to place program or service coordinators that support public housing residents.
The Resident Opportunity and Self-Sufficiency Grant Program, ROS, Family Self-Sufficiency, FSS, and Jobs Plus programs all offer opportunities for residents and the housing agency to work together to plan community services and programs.
To learn more about these programs, check out Guide 7 and the related training.
Sometimes a resident council may decide to use advocacy to sway the PHA. The goal of advocacy should be to build a stronger partnership with the PHA. It is generally a good idea to start with less confrontational tactics and only escalate if the resident council is not able to get results for important concerns residents have.
Some tactics are good ways to build resident council capacity.
Canvass residents, learn their concerns, and write a joint letter from the resident council to the PHA.
Request that a representative from the PHA attend a resident council meeting, especially if regular meetings are not happening.
Create a report to present to the PHA with detailed concerns and suggestions. Always make sure that residents are presenting clear, achievable requests. For example, list maintenance concerns in each apartment.
If necessary, other tactics might include
Raising concerns to the PHA's board of directors at their local meeting or to other local government officials.
for maintenance issues, contact housing inspectors or other local government officials.
Finally, reach out to the constituent services staff of your elected representatives and senators in Congress.
You can also contact your local HUD field office with serious concerns that are not being addressed.
Okay, let's do another knowledge check. What are some areas where the PHA and resident council can work together?
A, the housing agency plan. B, service programs. C, trainings. Or D, all of the above.
We'll pause for a moment for you to consider your answer.
The answer is D. These are all areas where the PHA and resident councils can work together.
Why is it helpful for a resident council to have an MOU with the PHA?
A, it defines how the groups will work together. B, it clearly states how often the resident council will meet. C, it defines the roles of the board of directors. Or D, all of the above.
We'll pause for a moment while you consider your answer.
The answer is A. An MOU defines how the resident council and PHA will work together, including how often the groups will meet together. It does not define the structure or work of the resident council, though.
These resources are related to the Guide 4 training. If you access the guide for this training, you'll find clickable links.
This training is part of the Public Housing Resident Organizing and Participation Toolkit. The full toolkit includes topical guides, customizable resident council documents and forms, tools related to tenant participation funds, and case studies of resident organizations around the country.
Please move on to the Guide 5 training, advisory boards, and the Housing Authority plan process.